Welcome to this week's edition of Completing the Puzzle with Jason DeFranco. I'm your host, Matt Doolittle, and every other week, we try to bring you some insight, some information on the world of business that you can also transfer into your life. Now, this week, we're going to be tackling the world of how to attract and keep the best talent for your business. How you doing, Jason?
Good, yourself?
Good. It's a Monday. You have a good weekend?
It was great.
It's awesome.
Fantastic.
It's all about keeping the right people around you, right?
Yeah.
So what do you do in an organization of this size? I mean, you've grown massively at Team Solutions Dental, along with your other businesses, so quickly over such a short period of time, over 6 years. What do you do in finding the right team members to bring in?
The biggest thing to realize is you don't just go looking for people. Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example. I had a friend, a female friend, who had a relationship go bad. And she was single, and she was about to start dating, and she wanted to talk about it. I said, okay. I said, what are you going to look for in the next guy? And she said, I don't know. I'm just going to meet people and look for one that, seems right for me. And I said, that sounds like a terrible idea. She said, why? I'm like, it didn't work that well last time. I said, why don't you now, while you're not in a relationship, come up with the things you'd like to see in your next relationship, so that when you meet people, instead of just, seeing how it goes, you've got not a checklist, but you've got some key points of what you're looking for. Mm-hmm. The biggest mistake that we used to make, and that I see lots of people make, is they just bring in bodies and see which one seems to be decent.
They're just filling a seat just to fill a seat.
Which means we need to recruit. And yeah, they ask some questions during an interview process and whatnot, but the key is begin at the beginning. The beginning is, I have a need. What is my need? Well, I got to hire somebody. No, what do you need? What kind of a person? What type of a position? What do you want out of this thing? How long do you want them to be around? What do you expect? Do you expect to hire someone who's going to be your next key player? Or do you think you're hiring someone that'll be transitional or temporary or seasonal? All these things matter. Instead of just going and looking for people, take a step back and analyze what you really need and why.
Are there any analytics you look at when you're doing that to fill a spot? Because there's the old, the baseball story for the Athletic A's where they went out and instead of just buying the biggest names out there, it was, let's fill this position because, for here, we need to make this many crowns so we can fill this spot. Do you look at that type of
Billy
data?
Bean.
Yeah.
That was what was the movie? They wrote the book about it.
Moneyball.
Movie. Moneyball.
Moneyball. Do money teeth.
There's a process of saying, are you adding a person or replacing a person? Because every addition and subtraction to the organization changes the dynamics, changes the people dynamics, the skill dynamics, the personality dynamics. So are you adding a position that you have created? Are you replacing a position that needs refilling? And some combination of those two. Because when you add someone, you rarely add a person because you have a need for a person. You don't usually wait until you're down a whole person to hire. Otherwise, you're scrambling. You're playing catch-up, especially when you're in growth mode. Mm-hmm. You have to hire ahead of the growth, which means when you hire that person, they might not have a full-time job. Well, I need another 4 hours a day of work done. These people are working as hard as they can. They need help. So I'm going to hire someone, but I don't have enough for them to come in and work 8 hours a day. What else are they going to do? When that happens, lots of times you start subdividing and moving things around and figuring out a better way to configure things. Yeah. But if you're hiring behind the curve, you never catch up. It's brutal.
Do you feel that the traits you look for in a candidate, when they come in to interview initially, whether it's with you or the team, whoever the hiring manager is on that, do you kind of give them a rundown of what you're looking for or what that team should look for?
I do now.
You didn't before? You kind of let everybody hire their own?
Yeah. I'd say, just make sure they can work second shift, or make sure you get someone with good attention to detail. We would take the most recent failure that we had and say, let's not do that, instead of taking a bigger picture view. Now we do a lot. We deconstruct previous hires. We deconstruct successful employees. We deconstruct the way that particular department operates, so that we're not just hiring a person, we're hiring the next element of that team. But there's basic things you always look for. And especially in COVID, you get a different brand of applicants. And there's things you always look for, like alertness during the interview process, following instructions. We actually used to do a thing where we would not give them clear instructions about where to go when they got here. We'd give them fairly vague, not misleading, but we wouldn't really give them very detailed, you'll park on the left side and go up the steps. We just said, look for suite 200 or something like that. And we'd watch out the window on applicant day, interview
I remember when
day.
I got here, it was a little tough navigating the
Sure.
parking lot, and I was like, okay, you go to the visitor spot if there's one available. You don't get in anybody's way, and then you call who you're supposed to call and wait outside.
Yeah.
Don't just go wandering through the building.
Yep.
That's probably the worst thing you could end up doing.
Yeah. We used to actually make it harder. We wouldn't give very specific instructions. Sometimes we wouldn't even give them the address. We'd say, okay, come on Monday at 2 o'clock, you kind of thing, and see who got here. Because, it seems like a pretty basic thing, Google the address, Google the company, make sure,
See if they just kind of gave up.
Yeah,
Would be the type of-
or see how organized they were. Did they Google it when they were in the car on the way here, going, I know about where it is, but shoot, let me check Waze or MapQuest and see exactly where it is. Oh, geez, I missed the turn or something. You'd get that all the time. We changed that to say that we need to be very systematic so that each person gets the same information. Now they get a confirmation email that gives them directions, where to go, what to do. But we didn't used to do that because it was kind of part of the test. And
This kind of gets into like that basic thing they teach you whenever you're looking for a new job coming out of high school or college. It's a standard. Get there 15 minutes early. I remember when I came to interview, I got here half an hour early and sat in my car 15 minutes. Mainly cool down, get my stuff together, double check all my notes, make sure I'm here, and then because I know when I was going out of the COVID stuff and interviewing and everything, people were amazed when you didn't show up in a shirt and tie, or even at least a coat and a shirt or a button up or anything. Especially you see kids come out of high school, it's their first job, but I remember when I interviewed at a radio station, I showed up suit and tie, and they go, by the way, don't wear that here anymore. You're going to scare the locals. So you always go extra on those things.
Yeah.
So that's what you were kind of looking for from those people?
I'm looking for one, are they where they're supposed to be when they're supposed to be? Because if they can't navigate their own personal life and get to an appointment on time, then I really don't have the time to try to teach them to do that. They got to have some basic functionality on their own before I'll consider their functionality as part of our team. But also, when someone shows up and people show up dressed differently for an interview, I'm not necessarily grading them on their clothing, but I'm grading them on how seriously they're taking the trip. If they show up looking like they just rolled out of bed, no matter what they're wearing, that's a strike.
Yeah.
If they show up alert and ready, and I don't make a distinction between they're wearing a polo shirt or a dress shirt or a suit. Sure, a suit looks better, but I mean, did you even learn what the organization was? Because we don't dress in suits around here. So it's more congruent if a person shows up dressed as if they're applying for the job they're dressed for.
Yeah.
If someone's showing up to work in the front office and they're dressed sharply, great. That doesn't mean they have to be wearing a suit and tie. If they show up for one of the facilities jobs or something where these people wear a t-shirt and jeans to work because they get dirty when they're doing the work.
Right.
If someone shows up in a t-shirt and jeans to apply for a job like that, if the t-shirt is clean and not ripped, and the jeans are not ripped, and they look like they fit well, they're paying attention, they're taking care of themselves, that's enough. Yeah. That's good enough. I'm not really grading them on their style.
In this world of how candidates are found now, it's changed a lot. It's not, they actually don't want you coming in. Well, I mean, this was pre-COVID even. If you went try to find a mall job or anything, it's like, oh, go fill out the online thing. Or,
sure.
Even my first full kind of job was working at a shoe store at Finish Line. And even when I went in back then, this was 2000, it had to be like 2000, 2001. They started with the digital one. They didn't even want you filling out a paper one. So that kind of evolved into now you got Indeed, LinkedIn, all those resources. What do you guys kind of do to check those, to see a candidate's references?
All of the above. I mean, we'll post things on Monster and Indeed. We'll post things on LinkedIn. Sometimes they show up on the social media sites. Sometimes they get reposted by people that are, friends of ours or that like the company. But we find candidates from everywhere. Some of our best candidates are referrals. Steve came in a couple of weeks ago and said, the gas station that I fill up at, there's a girl there that's always on top of things. She's always sharp. She's always awake. She's paying attention. She's polite. She's courteous. She shows good personality. She's working at a gas station, and she strikes me as a good person, just with those brief interactions. And I said, invite her in for an interview. We've got probably 10 people that work here that we found like that someone ran into them in their job at some other thing. Tim used to work at Publix. Just, wow, that guy just seems to really have his shit together, and he's really, engaging with people, and seems like he could be doing more.
Yeah.
And is that more something that we need? So that helps a lot.
You feel like that's kind of you've got to use the resources that are out there now to fill spots, but do you feel like that kind of referral thing is something maybe more people should keep an eye out on?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do it if I'm out somewhere, if I'm out to dinner, and a server just does a great job taking care of me, I'll give them my card. And I'll do that not just, in a situation like that. Yeah. I've been in the checkout line at the grocery store and asked the person doing the checkout, why are you doing this? Is this a summer job for you? Is this your career? Is this, and stuff, to see if they're a good candidate.
Somebody else you could bring in and fill a hole, or maybe even start something new.
Yep.
That's awesome. Now, when you go through that interview process, person comes in, they're giving their spiel, they're doing their thing. Is there any traits in body language you're looking at?
Oh, yeah.
Eye contact, is that something that's important to you?
Absolutely, almost more important than what they're saying, because you'd think people go to courses on how to take an interview.
Yeah.
Because they all answer questions pretty much the same way. I mean, you struggle as an interviewer when you start interviewing lots of people. Mm-hmm. Some of the position, we post a position, we might get 300 or 400 applicants. Now, that's online. We're not meeting all 300 or 400.
Right.
But we got to filter it down to a manageable level. Mm-hmm. And then you start talking to people, and it's like, this feels like the same interview over and over because they all answer questions the same way. I'm like, we have to ask better questions. So we'll come up with some more interesting questions. One of my favorite ones is one that Chad actually came up with one time. It's when we're doing a group interview, and there's 5 people in the room, and we've asked them a bunch of questions. We get towards the end, and Chad says, who would you pick out of this group to hire? Asks the applicants who they would hire. I haven't heard that
before. Yeah.
Yep. He'll also ask in a group interview, ask one applicant to tell you what another applicant said, to test listening skills, to test if they're even paying attention to the people beside them, or if they're just glued to you, trying to make sure they're paying attention to you.
Give you that just intention, and blank out everybody in the room.
The death stare, and they didn't even hear, because no one else matters. It's just about the person conducting the interview. Mm-hmm. I mean, I used to, when I worked other places, I'd come up with games for interviews. I'd go out, one time I went out and I would sit in the interview room, in the waiting room outside the interview room, and pretend that I was an applicant.
Yeah, this is a good trick.
Yeah,
I've seen many people do this.
And I'll ask people around me. I'll sit out there with an application, filling it out, and going, do you know what it is this job does? And just ask questions of the room. Yeah. And you get people that answer, I don't know, I'm just applying to everything. I got someone say that. Yeah. I crossed off half the room based on casual conversations I'd had or overheard, that I'm like, okay, I do not want that person here.
No, and to see how they treat everybody in the
Absolutely,
room.
that was a huge part of it.
Well, it was you're looking for those people in the room, but remember, was it Men in Black? Mm-hmm. That scene where they're filling out the applications, and he becomes the one out of the room that kind of jumps out, and it's the rest of these stuck-up guys giving Will Smith all the junk and not letting him borrow a pencil and everything. Yep. I mean, that's the type of stuff I think you look at and go, yeah, he doesn't do anything. Yeah, but look, he's a little different than everybody.
Yeah, I love the Kingsman references. Manners maketh the man. Mm-hmm. That kind of thing, where it's courtesy counts. Yeah. It's a big deal.
And when you're looking for these applicants, and this is a big deal in the world right now, and making sure your workforce is diverse, not in just your gender type or your ethnicity, but I mean personality wise. Where do you come from in the world? Mm-hmm. Where do you come from in the country? Like how much of a push has Team Solutions and your other companies kind of made it looking at that?
Oh, it's huge. I get in arguments with people when they talk about workplace diversity, because as you say, as soon as you say those words, people start thinking in terms of skin color or religion or politics or things like that. I don't care about any of that. None of that has any meaning whatsoever to how you do a job. How you do a job is the kind of person you are and where you come from. It has nothing to do with any of that other stuff. It it bothers me when those conversations come up. So I always correct them. I say workplace diversity is about coming at things from different perspectives. That people have work experiences, life experiences, they come from different cultures, they come from different economic strata, and because of that, they're looking at things from a different angle. And the more of those people you can get to look at one thing from those different angles, the better a chance you have of solving a problem, accomplishing a goal, making something work. So we're nuts about that. In fact, Julie runs customer service downstairs. She came from 13 years at McDonald's. And at the end of the interview, we picked her, and she said, why? She literally said, why me? She was puzzled. She's like, I don't have any knowledge in your industry, and some of the other people in the room did, and I don't have a college degree, and some of the other people did. She's like, I don't understand. Why'd you pick me out of this group? And I said, because the position that you're going to fill deals with systems. Some of them exist, some of them we have to build. And a person who's worked in a place like McDonald's for an extended period of time knows systems. They understand the value of using a system to get something done with consistency over and over and over. They don't get tired of making sure it's consistent. That's something that they get energy from. And we need that because as we're growing, we're building systems all the time. And some work and some don't. I said, I need someone who's been in the middle of some of the best systems around who can go, but if you do it that way, people aren't going to understand, or that she can challenge it based on her experience.
Yeah.
There was a diversity thing that no one saw coming. They were like, really? You hired a person for like what's going to be a key position based on fast food experience? I said, not fast food experience.
No.
Experience with systems for over a decade. Everybody's worked in a fast food place for a summer, but she'd worked there for over a decade, which meant she was immersed in the systems.
Yeah.
You know?
And I worked at Disney for a little bit, and I saw that. I mean,
Yep.
there were certain ways that things got done. I worked for the call center for a little bit, and there was a proper script that if you didn't say these key points, you got dinged on it. So, like, it's still ingrained in me when I answer a call
Sure.
or from anybody that's how I hit it.
When you're hiring, when you're interviewing lots of people, you're going to get people who come from the same places over and over. Here in Orlando, you're going to get people from the tourism industry over and over. And each of those big companies have a slightly different twist on the service experience. You should learn that. I know how Disney deals with training and service from a corporate perspective and how they train their people to handle it. So when someone comes and applies and they've worked for 10 years at Disney, I know they have that perspective because it's ingrained and it's their culture.
Yeah.
And in some cases, it's a bad thing, not Disney specifically, but in some cases, a corporate culture from another industry will have characteristics that don't work in your industry. You got to know that. You have to know who the former employers are and what their culture is like. How do they prepare their people for life in the workforce?
Yeah.
And it's here we see applicants from half a dozen big companies in their resume background, and you can kind of see the consistency of behaviors and patterns. So we know, all right, for this position, we don't want anyone from that company, because that's actually a negative.
Yeah.
We do want someone from that company because they think like we do on this element, and this person will be able to assimilate quickly to the way we do things. Sometimes we stay away from people who've been with big companies because we're still very entrepreneurial. We change things very fast. Most big companies have a structure that's necessary. To support a large organization, you need a better structure. But if people have been in that setting for a decade, sometimes they can't think outside of that structure. And creative problem solving doesn't come naturally to them, and it can actually be a detriment.
It's hard to break them. Sometimes it's hard to break them with those systems.
Oh, yeah.
So let's jump ahead to you were talking about, all these companies we live in so just so you guys know, we're based in the Central Florida, Orlando area. COVID hit this area really hard in the tourism business from, coast to coast, all over the place, whether it's the theme parks, the hospitality industry, restaurants, hotels, cruise lines, general beaches and everything. what applicants have you guys kind of seen look more towards a company like this, opposed to a company that came out of COVID pretty quickly, has survived and actually expanded greatly in this post major pandemic area? Who have you seen trying to apply here and come in and kind of get away from maybe one of those that was a little shaky during that time?
Mm-hmm. So that's been really interesting. It's been counterintuitive. My thought, when we were sure that we are stable and moving forward, and we knew that so many companies had struggled and so many people had lost their jobs, my thought was, this is an opportunity. This is a chance to find some really great people that might not have been available before, that might have been kind of comfortable where they were and not thought about leaving. But now it's a reality that they have to face. This might be a great time for us to find some really talented people. And I was excited about the interview process and seeing what was out there now versus prior. It hasn't been the case.
Really?
The experience has been that these companies in general, seem to have used COVID as an opportunity to dump low-performing people without having to explain or defend it.
Okay.
The average applicant, in terms of ability to answer questions, ability to attach logical, constructive statements, the ability to communicate well, the ability to demonstrate value, to communicate about things that are important, way down. Way down. I mean, disappointingly down.
Wow.
To where I had to rethink what had been my concept.
Yeah.
My concept was, hey, this is a no harm, no foul kind of thing. There are people who pulled their weight, who were great employees, who lost their jobs, who are now going to be looking for that next thing. We haven't seen it. We've seen very, very little of that.
That's interesting, because you see in all the trade papers and everything, I mean, people that had been working in high-end executive, I know of a lot of them in this area that were in high-end executive jobs, got laid off. They were with, some of the biggest companies in the area for 20, 30 years. Great, background with everything, and they're just not, they're not what you thought they were, maybe?
Maybe. I mean, maybe, when I went to college, I thought that's where all the smart people were. So I was very disillusioned when I got to college. I'm like, this is going to be great. This is like what you see in movies where all the geniuses are figuring out how to change the world. And I got to college. These are the same people I went to high school with.
Turned
what the
into
heck?
Animal House.
Yeah.
that
would have been okay.
That was pretty much my college experience. I was thinking, I'm going to go change the world and do this and that. I'll be at the party. I got a thing. I got to go see a guy about a horse.
But instead, when I got to college, it was a real disappointment, because I had this idea in my head. That's my head. That's my fault. But I had this idea in my head that we'd be sitting around whiteboards till 4 a.m. trying to figure out particle physics, and it wasn't that way. Instead, it was just more of high school.
Yeah.
It was really disappointing to me, because I was looking forward to that change, that different kind of learning environment. It may be that this is the same thing. That I assume that people at some of these bigger companies, higher ups at these bigger companies, suddenly set free means really talented leadership people are coming onto the marketplace. Maybe they're just not as good as I thought they would be.
And they were just kind of tenured into those places?
Maybe.
And it was like, cost us too much to get rid of them type deal?
I mean, it's certainly a syndrome in many organizations that someone gets promoted out of a functional job, a manufacturing job or a service job, and ends up in a leadership position that they're not really well suited for. And the company doesn't want to move them back down, but also can't leave them here because they're directly supervising the people doing those tasks and they're screwing it up. So they promote them a couple more times. They end up at middle management where they walk around with a coffee cup all day and saying, yeah, that'd be great, thanks, It's a syndrome. It happens. We've all seen it in lots of companies. Maybe it's just more pervasive than we realized.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I have read that a few, and to go back to the point, I have read that in a few of the trade papers that has been a problem and quite a shock to a lot of people. Going, these guys were there for 20 years and they didn't really contribute much.
Right.
They got a paycheck. They didn't get in trouble. They showed up when they needed to, and that was about it.
Yeah.
And they just kind of went with it for those many years.
We're interviewing people who had 6-figure salaries, and I'm not sure I would trust them to work at Dunkin' Donuts sometimes.
Yeah.
It's scary. Maybe it's just luck of the draw. Maybe it's just the really talented people either are afraid to go to a smaller company for fear that it can't afford them or can't use their skills. So maybe We're just not seeing them. Maybe the really talented ones have something lined up already, that as soon as they walked out one door, they walked in another one. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I know that it's been a consistent experience that everyone who's involved in the interview process has commented on. That, oh my God, what happened? Why are we getting so many people who really don't seem like they should be in the workforce at all?
Yeah.
Much less coming from high-level positions and expecting dramatic things.
Do you see that as maybe a thing where they didn't educate themselves heading into it? Because, we didn't know this was going to hit as hard as it did. We thought maybe a couple weeks, a month. For some of these industries, it's now just a year. Like California is just opening
Sure.
for a lot of their businesses. So I don't think they were expecting that. Was it them not kind of continuing their education, you think? And how important is that, like, kind of formal education they may have gotten at a college or a university or a trade school coming into a company like this?
I don't think college really matters. There's a couple of things you can refer to. You can say, someone with a degree has demonstrated the ability to complete something they start. They entered into a multi-year plan and went through with that plan. So there's something to be said for that. But the quality of education in colleges today really doesn't give you anything of value unless you're going into a very specific... If you're going into engineering, you need an engineering degree.
I want my doctor to have a degree.
Of course. But in terms of general employability and skill set, critical thinking, all the things that matter, work ethic, college does nothing to prepare people.
Right.
It actually, I think, limits people in a lot of ways because it creates such a huge safety net underneath them that now they step out of college into the workforce and there's an entitlement thing. I've got a degree now. I should make $50,000 more than I was going to otherwise. And they have the general knowledge, but none of it's applicable. There's nothing from a 100 level course that you take into the job force.
No.
So what's your degree in? Well, unless your degree is in the thing that I do, it probably doesn't matter. All it tells me is you completed something you started. So I really don't give it any weight unless we're looking for a very specific skill set. I'd be much more interested to see some life experience, some work experience. I'd be much more interested to see someone came from the military, came from the Peace Corps, came from, missionary work. Doesn't matter what the basis of it was, but intentional hard work carries a lot more weight to me than completing an educational process.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I saw that. I've got one degree, my bachelor's, kind of worth it. Got my foot in some doors for internships, and that's really all I used it for. I can't tell you any of the other stuff I used it for. I used it for 2 internships. The other one I got that cost me a lot more money, it's a waste of 2 years.
Sure.
And a small size Mercedes. That's the way I felt about it.
I get it.
And it was not what I thought it was going to be going into that, and the kind of that carrot they wave in front of you at those university admissions application things, or like, hey, come meet the blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Not even close.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot to be said about, getting out there, especially now in this market, of just hit the ground running.
Yeah.
So
I'd rather see someone that was successful in a position than someone that got straight A's in college.
yeah, I completely agree. So we're through that process. You've brought somebody in. You've gone through their accreditations. You've checked all their social media stuff. There's nothing questionable on there that you guys can find. Even if there's questions that come up. Mine, I got a bunch of goofy stuff on mine. But now you like the person. You've put the offer out there. The offer's on the table. You've kind of come to an agreement on the salary or what you feel the salary is and what they want, benefits, all that fun stuff. What kind of you seen has been the evolution of that over the years?
I'm 10 times more direct than I ever used to be. It used to be it was like a dance when you're offering someone a job. It's it's like asking somebody out. It's like, well, should I approach boldly and just say it, or should I, sort of look at them from the corner and smile when they look my way, or should I buy a drink?
Yeah.
Should I,
It's a whole courtship.
Yeah, there's this whole ritualistic thing, and you always get it wrong, or you always get it right. It doesn't really matter because there's no scorecard. Now, when I've decided someone's a fit, I just tell them, I think you're a fit. And we either have a clear-cut number that this position is worth, and that's the offer, or it's a conversation about where we think this person's going to end up and what that path looks like. We get people sometimes who come in with previous experience and they will be used to a certain number. I'm used to making $100 an hour. And I say, okay, and what'd you do for that? And they tell me. And I say, well, if you do that here, it could be worth more than that. But I don't know until you do it. I need to see the results first. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to mitigate a little of my risk, and I'm being open with you about this. I don't hedge, I tell them. I think you might be worth even more than that. But we're going to start you at $90 an hour. When you are settled in and doing the job, you're probably worth $100. But if you can do it at this level, I'll pay $120 for it. So you tell me, are you willing to pay your dues a little bit? And do you think you can do it this well? Because if you can do it this well, this is what I'll pay. But, you're risking yourself now.
Yeah.
Don't snow me. I mean, if you, aim high and shoot low, you're going to be shooting yourself in the foot. I have a lot of those kinds of conversations with people that bring either a special skill set or previous experience within the industry or something that we're working in. But in general, I tell people a number. And I say, look, this is about what I'm willing to pay for this. Does that sound fair to you? And if we can do it in a different way, if we can develop this thing, there's a lot of growth going on. There's a media department. Well, sort of. There's a couple of people working on media stuff. There's not really a media department. It's not a division of the company. It's a project room, But it can be.
And potential for growth. I'm sure that out there from the media.
Oh, yeah. And if it becomes, what have I got? I've got 6 different companies right now and looking at 2 more. So at some point there will be a media division that handles things for all of those companies. Then what does it look like? Is it 10 people? Is it 20 people? I don't know. Does it do things like this, or is it operating at a whole different level? This is a whole different level from what it was before. So when I look at things like that, I don't like to think in terms of limits. I think in terms of potential. And I say, this will go as far as you can make it go. And that's going to be up to you.
Okay. And I think that's important for a lot of people to know, because you go, and I'm taking this from experience from my business courses, and when we were getting out of that program, like the one I said that wasn't worth that much, they did have a whole process they put you through. You interview with somebody who's an expert in interviewing and resumes and all this. And I'm like, everything you've just told me, everybody I've ever talked to in the business, or this is to the person, not you, was completely the opposite of how to go in and deal with this. Like, this is the textbook way, but this is not how you go talk to people.
Yeah.
And so I kind of crafted my own stuff and everything. And that's I think you got to find your own path on that, and I think you got to know the people you're talking to.
Sure.
So, because if you're going to interview for a lawyer, that's a way different job than going to interview at a golf course of how you're going to go about that.
Sure.
Type of deal. So now we're through the interview, we're through the negotiation. You're bringing them in; they're part of the team now. It's day one. Orientation is a huge part of the first couple days here. It's a 2-day thing, and I'll tell you, Disney was only 8 hours one day. It's called. I forget what they call it, but it's some magical day where Mickey comes in and gives you a hat at the end of it. Great. So yours is a 2-day, and part of that is actually a 2-hour conversation and discussion with you.
Yep.
And I say that, you do a lot of the talking, everybody's new, but you open it up for questions, you're happy to take them in the middle of it. I think you kind of look for that. I've seen it a couple times. They throw those nuggets out there for you to try to grab at that. Everybody's question, and we've talked about, why do you do that? Take 2 hours out of your day. We talked about this in one of the other episodes where you know what your value per hour is.
Sure.
So you're taking that time for 2 hours to talk to these new people that you don't even know are going to be here past 90 days. So why do you find that important?
Because they might be here past 90 days. And I don't want to wait till 90 days in to invest in them.
Then you finally go talk to them.
I want them to know that it's meaningful to me that they are here on day one. But also, whenever we teach a concept, I want to get as close to the source for that material as possible. And the material that we're teaching on day one, the culture, the mission, the values, that's stuff that I created. So I'm the source. I want to get to the source. If you're learning to do something, go to the person who's best at it or the person that created it. Since I created it, that's where I want them getting it from. I don't want them to hear it watered down. I don't want them to hear it spiced up. I want them to hear it the way I meant it. I want to be able to answer questions. When they question something about the values, when they're asking a question about why we do something a certain way, I can give them an unequivocal answer. I want them to have that certainty day one. I also want them to know that I will invest myself in them from the day one. Now, I can't spend that kind of time with people every single day. There aren't enough hours in the day.
Right.
But it's important to make a good first impression. It's important for people to know what I think and what's important to me, because everything else filters down throughout the organization. This way, I don't have to wait for them to be here 3 or 6 months before I can have a meaningful conversation with them. I can have that at the beginning. And it does suck when someone doesn't work out.
Right.
When someone's been here a week or two and goes, it's like, wow, that was a terrible waste of time.
Yep.
I wish we'd gotten better at filtering that person out before we spent that time. But I don't like to bet on negative when it comes to people. I want to bet that they'll succeed. I want to bank on that. I want to, put the money and the effort in first.
And I feel like during that, you give a reason for the things that are around the building. I mean, like you said, we've got, and I'll post them on our pages, the mission, values, the vision for the company, why the team member culture is the way it is. So I think that that's important, so that while you're walking around, you see the boards on the walls, you see, people kind of talking about or why we do the things we do, the kind of, I don't know, bonuses that are going on around here. That's why they happen.
Yeah.
I think that's important that you do that, because I felt like it was something almost personal
Sure.
for that. I was like, really? Wait, how long? 2 hours? Like,
Right.
I didn't expect that, because I've never seen that before. So I think that that's something that everybody can kind of take out of that, and then maybe you do that. Maybe that's something you do. It doesn't have to be 2 hours, but a half hour, an hour, rather than just a video present. I mean, granted, if you work at a company that's got, a couple billion people, you can't be at every one of them. But I mean, for you to be able to do that for almost every orientation is awesome. Now, how do you... Obviously, you just talked about if someone didn't work out after a couple days or a month or two, damn, we lost them.
Yeah.
How do you kind of pick those people out on your side of it? Not just them making that decision. Maybe they started here, they started working in an apartment, they're like, I just can't do this. I'm not good at it, and I leave. How do you kind of spot those good and bad people for a fit for the company once they've been here for a little bit?
Pretty much right away, we put them under a microscope. We're watching carefully for certain things. We've had enough people come and go that we know the indicators when someone's not a good fit. They disengage. They don't work hard. They don't seem enthusiastic. I mean, starting here, you learn so much stuff, and it's so different from the way other companies operate. Someone should be pretty jazzed for a while after starting. The honeymoon phase shouldn't wear off anytime soon, kind of thing. But we will watch for people disengaging, usually in one way or another. Either interpersonally, they're just not engaging with people, with the work, they just don't seem to be getting it. There's a lot of ways, but in general, if someone's dismissed in their first week or two, it's because they don't work hard.
Yeah.
That's it.
Wow.
They're lazy.
Yeah.
The overwhelming majority of people that are gone in the first 2 weeks, they're just lazy.
And that's them not paying attention, and that's them not taking notes.
Not engaging, yeah.
Right, playing on their phone,
Yep.
type of thing. Okay.
They're just not taking it seriously.
And you can just get them out of here quick before you waste any more time or money on them?
Because it's a tremendous expense. It's a burden. We've got people working hard all around them who are trying to stop doing what they're doing to teach something and then go back and finish their work.
Yeah.
Well, that's a burden, and I'm making it harder on everybody by introducing a new person. We've got to get a return on that as soon as possible. But if we realize the person's wasting our time and effort, then they just need to leave. That's just not fair.
So, and how, I know that we've kind of talked about how maybe somebody was here way longer than even a couple days or something. They've been here a year. How do you address that? I know there was just an incident recently where it really got kind of, I don't know, you didn't know what to do with the person. Finally, you were just like, I've had it, you're gone. Like, how did you finally come to that after almost a year?
It always comes back to the values. And that was a person who, at one time, had done really well. So when they struggle, or when they don't seem to be serious or trying hard, you've got to question what changed. So I always look at myself first. Have I neglected this person? Have they not gotten opportunities? Were they expecting something they didn't get? If they seem to be doing well for a period of time and now they're not, we need to take a close look at that and make sure that that's not our fault. We had someone 2 years ago, 6 months in, just was not doing a good job. She's a fantastic person. I thought she was great as a person, and even as an employee. She was always on time, always asked good questions, cared about doing it right, but wasn't doing well performance-wise, just wasn't doing a good enough job. And I had asked those questions. And the answer was she'd been put in the wrong chair. We realized that just the particulars of that task weren't what she was good at and could engage with. We moved her to a different task, and she was great at that and soared after that. The one you're referring to had done a great job for a period of time and then started to downslide. And we said, well, maybe the person's been neglected, maybe they have something going on in their personal life. You have to explore these things as much as you can, because if it worked once, why isn't it working now? We got to know why. We have to know for our sake and for theirs. In this case, the person became disengaged and was just disillusioned and had a different idea about what their life should be.
Does that start pushing like a toxic kind of culture around?
It does.
It's like, when a crab dies in the tank, the rest of the crabs start eating off it, and they all start dying. I watch a lot of Deadliest Catch, just admitting.
Okay.
But, I mean, that's kind of how I look at that as a toxic culture. Once that one starts just going, it'll just start spreading, and it gets into the people that weren't like that before.
It's
now,
a cloud over the whole organization eventually. And that was one of the reasons that person had to leave. Was they couldn't pull their heads out, they couldn't get out of their funk. They had some life changes in their personal life, and they wanted more from work, but they weren't willing to put in what it takes to get more.
Right.
And you have very frank conversations with people at that point. You say, I understand you would like to make $5 an hour more, and I'm willing to pay $5 an hour more if you can do this, this, and this. Here's the criteria. If you're willing to do that, here's what I'm willing to pay for it. But they felt like they should just have it. And I'm like, well, nothing about our culture says that. Those words have never been said to you. You'll just get it, whether you earn it or not.
Yeah.
From the day you started, what's the matter with you?
It's not like there's a 10-year timeline or a tier type thing. Or
Every person's an individual.
Yeah.
Every person needs they need a pace, they need goals, they need an opportunity to develop. And some people want that to be really specific, and some people want it to be more general. But everyone needs a path.
Now, we've talked about the toxic side, get the bad stuff out of the way. How do you keep a good team together? Because I know we here at Team Solutions just started doing team building exercises. We had our first one this week, and it went great. Learned out a few stuff about people. They all know I dress weird outside of work and all that fun stuff. How do you kind of see keeping a good team together and making sure that core knows that, you guys are working great, you're appreciated, your managers like it, keep going?
Some of it's just words. It doesn't take much to walk by and let someone know you heard something good about them, especially in a position like where I'm at now. I'm not in front of everybody all day long. I'm in my office some of the time. I'm at other buildings some of the time, so they see less of me physically. So when I walk up to a person and say, hey, I heard about that thing you did, that was really great, and they didn't even know I was aware it had happened, that has a lot, of pull. It carries a lot of weight in terms of cheering people up. But more than that, the team building stuff is about them recognizing that they have an entity as a group, an identity as a group. And we started out slowly just saying, hey, why don't you team leaders take your people out and do some fun stuff? And it's just sort of grown from there. And every single person I have talked to, whether they're in management or not, and I ask them how those go, they immediately light up. They enjoy spending time around their coworkers, not working. And that's not true at all companies.
No.
I consider that a key element of our philosophy of our culture is that we get good people and put them with other good people, and they get along well. They generally, there's no one allowed to hang out in a department and poison the well kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's been so instructional to me. I've seen upticks in the business stuff. I've seen upticks in performance metrics after those events. It's not just I feel good, I like Susie, we got along, and I never knew she was into dogs like I am, and it's a closer kinship. They function better, they communicate better, they feel more open. bringing things up. And it results in a concrete benefit to the organization that is so good that that was actually the deciding factor about me getting the luxury suite at the arena.
Okay. Yeah.
That was the deciding factor. We had talked about it maybe someday, you know, blah, blah, blah. After all of these team building events, when I went and saw the suite, I was like, I could just picture it. I could just picture one of our teams here, you know, enjoying the luxury box kind of thing. And it's an astronomical amount of money.
Right.
It's crazy how much those things cost. And I didn't even hesitate.
But there's a good ROI on it if you're seeing upticks in
Absolutely.
work from that, or it's an achievement thing too.
Yeah.
It's a goal. It's, you know, I worked somewhere previously that had a box in Tampa, and part of it was, you know, if you did this and you were in good standing or whatever, you could put in to go get tickets to the Lightning game or something
Absolutely.
like that. So that was a big incentive for us.
Oh yeah, and that's, I just sat there picturing those things.
Yeah.
And I said, oh yeah, we're doing this. We're absolutely doing this.
It's awesome. So we're at a point where the company's growing pretty big, almost over 100, if not already there. It changes every week I talk to you, so
I know.
I don't really know who's coming and going sometimes. We get the list.
We're getting close.
We get the note in the media part where she's like, oh, he just hired 3 people. I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, let's go see them. So you know, you're established, you've got a settled business, and we like to bring up, you know, entrepreneurial topics on this show because we feel like you guys get a lot out of it, hearing, you know, Jason's expertise, stories, and you know, kind of what went good, what went bad. When you're starting out, this is lab day 1. It's you and Chad, the 2 people that started the lab. You're looking for your first couple hires of this company. You just, you know, you've said it before. You mortgaged a house. You've put all your time, all your money. You're sacrificing relationships for it. What do you look for in those first people that you're like, all right, now we're trusting them. You know, you're trusting them here, but it's a little easier to kind of navigate it. You're trusting them with like my life right now. How do you kind of look for those people starting out?
The first couple, desperation. The first couple, it was, I can't do this by myself. I need someone to help with something. It's just too much to handle.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot of selection process from a philosophical standpoint. It was just, can this person help me? But when you get past that, and for us, getting past that took a little time because we had a list of people that we knew we wanted to work here. We already knew people in the industry. We already knew people that if we ever had our own place, I want that person working with us. So we were probably around 35 or 40 people before we got to that point. And that's just unique to us because we had a waiting list of people. But somewhere around 35 to 40 people, we got to that point where now it's time to trust someone else with parts of the business. And that's hard. It's like your child,
Yeah.
you know. It's not only where all your money comes from, but it's also where all your effort has gone. And you're going to bring someone in and give them authority over a piece of it that no one else has ever had authority over. You know, when you've moved up in someone else's company, well, I had that job before them, and they'll have it after me. It's a transitional thing. When it's yours and you've built all of it, giving away a piece of it feels like giving away a piece of your body. It's difficult. It's traumatic.
It's gonna be scary.
Oh yeah,
Before you sign that paper, you gotta go,
absolutely.
what are we doing here?
And but when we started to do it, we fumbled around a little bit. And I can tell you that what I would do now is only care about ethical match. I would only care that this person matched our identity, that they were willing to work their tail off, that they were willing to bleed for the company, that they were absolutely honest to a fault, that they just, I'll lie and hurt your feelings rather than, you know, that kind of honesty. And that they want to see something grow so badly that they'll die without
They'll lay it on the line for you.
Having those things in place would be enough. The rest of it, they could learn the business from us. But finding people who think like that and feel like that is the key and would be the key again.
Just somewhere, so we'll take it back to kind of the beginning of how you finding people, and is it just kind of a crapshoot or a coin flip in finding somebody out there? You know, is there any advice you would give to everybody out there, small business, medium business, big business, you know, just starting your own lemonade stand, you know, that you would look at to refine, you know, or retune what the hiring methods are right now out there?
Tell stories. We have people that apply that tell us, they read the story on the website, the Jerry Maguire story, they call it, because I referenced the movie in there and how I felt. The people that gravitate to your stories are the people that share your thinking. Tell stories and ask them to tell stories, rather than the question and answer, the rote stuff that every employee, where do you see yourself in 5 years? These tired old questions. Get them to tell you a story, and you tell them stories, and see if your stories line up. It's a very human thing. It goes back to the dawn of civilization. Humans tell stories, and humans like hearing stories. It's why the movie industry exists. It's why books exist. All of these things exist. I mean, of course, there's reference material, but how much reference material is there compared to how much creative storytelling is there out there in the world? And I would say doing that, you will learn more about a person than the best interview questions on earth. You're better off, if you're hiring for a key role or you're hiring your first couple employees, put more time into it, not less. You feel like you have no time at all, you just got to get somebody.
Right.
And maybe that's the case, and if you can clearly define what you need, just go get it. But if you're talking about cultural fit, if you're talking about these are going to be the key people that help me grow and sustain a business, go have drinks, go sit at a coffee shop, go someplace else. Have a conversation that's real rather than a set of question and answer periods.
Yeah, going down the checklist like a regular HR kind of department thing.
Yeah.
Is that somewhere you can pull like a culture feel for them out to? Like, they're telling you about, I don't know, some fishing story, but you're not really a fisherman. But at least there's something in there.
There's always something you can learn about people. You can teach yourself to ask questions about how is this relevant to me. So if someone is telling a story about something that you're really not familiar with, that you don't relate to, you can still find the thematic elements to the story. Is it a story about hard work? Is it a story about perseverance? Is it a story about getting through difficult times? Is it a story about creativity? Is it a story about caring for their family? Is it a story about, things they're passionate about? You ask someone, hey, what are you passionate about? If they can't answer that question, I won't hire them.
Yeah. You got to have something.
Everyone has something, but some people don't really feel it strongly. There's a huge difference. I used to call it being awake. Even when I was a teenager, I remember the first time I said it. I was invited to a wedding by a girl, and her cousin came in, and I noticed him. And I said, you know what? That's the first guy that walked into this wedding reception who's actually awake. Everyone's going through pleasantries. Everyone's going through, oh, how's your family? How's this? He walked in. His eyes are bright and full of energy. He's engaging with people. He's got an energy with him as he's walking around talking to people. He's waking other people up, kind of thing.
Bring the charisma.
Yeah. And from that point on, I've always looked for that in other people. When you look someone in the eyes, is it just like looking at a haze, like a dull screen?
Yeah, is there something going on?
Is there a spark there? Is something going on behind their eyes? You can see that. It's a tangible thing. And that you can get from the storytelling.
And one last piece of advice to somebody going out there to interview for their first job ever.
Going out to interview there's all the usual crap. Be on time, be early, not on time, dress for the position, all those kinds of things. But I would say, know who you are and let that come across in the interview. Take over the interview if you have to. Be polite. I remember when I went to work for a major corporation, I sat down and I'd read a couple of articles about interviewing. And I sat down and answered their questions to their satisfaction. They asked if there were any questions, and I said, yes. And I said, what does your boss do? I asked the interviewer. And this was a gimmick back then. It was, what's your boss do? And they said, oh, well, he's the manager of such and such. I said, okay, I'd like to be his boss within 5 years. And they said, oh, well, that's some pretty aspirational goals and stuff. And then I told the story. And I said, I'm sure it is. But if I'm not going to push myself hard and try to do something impressive in your organization, I don't want to be part of it. I want to work for a place that's really cool, and I want them to think I'm really cool when I work here.
Yeah.
I was hired on the spot, and it went great for a period of time. but take over and tell a story. Okay. Let them know who you really are, so they know if they really
bring
want
a personality, really be who you are, and do your research. Know who you're going to interview for. Don't just show up. Don't just send out 9 million LinkedIn connects or Indeed proposals or anything like that.
Carpet bombing.
Yep. Well, that's going to do it for this week in Completing the Puzzle with Jason DeFranco. I'm Matt Doolittle. That, of course, thank you for your time, Mr. Jason DeFranco.
Thank you.
Make sure you guys, we're going to be doing a lot more social media stuff. Hit subscribe on our YouTube page. Hit our like button on our Facebook page, and we'll have a lot more coming to you. We'll see you next time.